Good day, Professor. I would like to present and develop the topic ethics in audiovisual translation, specifically dubbing and subtitling. First, I would like to begin by exploring the ethical challenges in dubbing or when translating in dubbing or and subtitling for film, TV, and online platforms. As general knowledge, we know that audiovisual translators face many ethical dilemmas when they have to be in the role as cultural mediators. The primary challenge we could consider is trying to achieve that accuracy while trying to navigate through the cultural differences that we all have between the source and the target audience. When they try to balance this, it becomes complex because when they try to translate the content, most of it contains sensitive material. So, considering that, one of the most critical ethical considerations when they subtitle and caption is the accuracy. Because when the subtitles or the captions are inaccurate, it can first alter the viewing experience and secondly potentially misinterpret the original content. So translators they must decide whether they need to prioritize the literal translation or try to adapt this or using cultural adaptation, especially when they handle dialogue that may contain culturally specific jokes, references, or even idioms. So this time and spatial constraint of or for audiovisual translation may complicate these decisions. So subtitlers they need to or try to condense dialogue for it to fit on the screen. So they might be forced to make like ethical judgments whether which content they need to prioritize or which ones they need to omit. As noted by researchers, they say that when the audience watches a film or TV programs without visual translation, they might sometimes feel like spatially or visually constrained. Like if the translator subtitle or dubbing is the only channel for them to understand the original program or film. So that's why like viewers they rely entirely on translator choices specifically like to interpret the original content. Moving forward, audiovisual translation or AVT has a special place for censorship because censorship is not just one kind as we see on TV. It presents in many forms, and in audiovisual translation, it's spread across different regions. It can be defined as like the practice of examining films, books, and other kinds of media, and trying to essentially remove anything that can be or could be considered offensive, politically dangerous, or morally harmful. So this uh, practice often impacts how the foreign content is presented to the audiences, and also they can alter the intended message of the original work. Censorship in general, it can be imposed or presented through um, official channels or also presented voluntarily by the translator themselves. So because it's going through an official channel, most viewers they might not notice the truth behind the original intent of the media content. There is a particular like subtle form of censorship that most don't notice, which is called under translation. This is where elements, especially sensitive elements in the source text, they are downgraded in the translation. This approach, especially in common, in it's especially common like in subtitling, and it often represents like the more sensible like form of the linguistic manipulation. There's some research on English Chinese subtitling, for instance, that reveals that this under translation frequently targets, let's say, sexual references, swearing, and profanity, which are most common in media content and audiovisual translation. Uh, Most commonly known strategies here would be including or using Chinese idiomatic expressions and euphemism. For example, there's one case study from the film in the Shape of Water, which there is a reference to the let's say quote missionary position quote. This English phrase was translated simply as quote new exercise position quote in the official Chinese subtitles. So obviously this is a form of censorship and completely sanitizes the original dialogue. And this is problematic because it's invisible for some, even though some people that might know Chinese, it's still like the viewers still generally are unaware that the content has been altered. Now we have the approaches, the regional ethical approaches, and these can vary also across regions because they reflect generally the different cultural values and audience expectations. Let's say first in China, audiovisual translation is often characterized by self-censorship, driven by some kind of paradox that the Chinese translations may face on a daily basis, which is a rigorous official censoring process. So like Chinese audience, they might not, or they might have this growing awareness of possible self-censorship. So what this paradox creates is that they create a situation where the translator they need to preemptively censor content to just avoid problems or conflicts with the authorities. Now, well, this also the impact of this approach, which is like we mentioned previously, the under translation, which functions also as a disguise, and all taboo language or what is considered offensive for them is concealed by idiomatic Chinese expressions and euphemistic expressions. Um, Secondly, we have the Western approach, which is more or tends to emphasize accuracy and what the viewer wants to interpret. It's basically it's basically means that they have these like content rating systems that like make the audiences to make the informed decisions about the material they consume. But sometimes in the Western context, the translators also need to go through ethical considerations related to the offensive language or any other cultural representation. Let's say also that they need to highlight that the cultural tone in translation studies, um, like the cultural values are translated depends well not only on the linguistic approach, but also between languages that need to make decisions about like based on power, ideology, or also cultural values that can have these ethical implications on the translator choices. Based on the challenges and regional approaches discussed, there are several guidelines I consider to help maintain the ethical integrity in ABT. First, we have the balance of accuracy and sensitivity. Here in ethical ABT, it requires balancing the fidelity to the source material with the sensitivity to the target culture. So in this sense, translators they must strive to preserve the essence and the intent of the original content while trying to consider the cultural context in which the viewers will receive. So here, translators will mostly or most of the times will deal with potentially offensive content, so they might consider evaluating whether the offensive element is central to the narrative. Also, assess the target audience culture expectations, and also exploring different translation options that could maintain the impact without causing unnecessary offense. Secondly, we have the transparency and accountability. Transparency in the translation choices, it could enhance ethical practice in audiovisual translation. Among these might include acknowledging when significant adaptations have been made, and most importantly, being accountable for the translation choices that could potentially alter the original content. Thirdly, we have the classification systems. Here is basically advocating for clear classification systems across regions that could reduce the needs for the self-censorship while still respecting cultural differences and the viewer preferences. And lastly, we have professional development and cultural education. So here, ongoing professional development and cultural education for AVT could enhance as well ethical practice, and this includes training in cultural sensitivity and awareness, educating about the evolving social norms and taboos in both the source and the target cultures, and giving opportunities to discuss the ethical challenges or dilemmas with colleagues or experts in the field, which will help train translators for a better result. So, in conclusion, ethics in audiovisual translation, they offer and encompasses in complex considerations in accuracy, power, and also viewer experience. Eh, these approaches to these ethical challenges, they vary across regions, and they reflect different cultural values and audience expectations. So moving forward, the field would benefit from the great transparency about the translation choices, and also the improved classification systems that will respect the cultural differences while trying to preserve the integrity of the um, intended message, and also considering the ethical implications of AVT practices. So if translators and media they address these challenges thoughtfully, translators they could fulfill their role as the cultural mediators while trying to maintain the ethical integrity, as well as increasingly like interconnect with the global media landscape. Thank you.